What's up everybody, MGM here once again. This is the final video in this series of building a starter world and getting ready for your first game, especially for you new GMs out there. Real quick, allow me to take this moment to remind you, because I'm supposed to, that I don't get paid for this, and anything you see on the table is something I purchased myself. But since I have your attention on the table, today's books are two friends of the channel. They have not paid me to do this or say this, and these are still books I purchased myself. But Ian Tassin of Apotheosis and Jeremy Pete of Grit Fantasy are friends of the channel and created some really awesome tabletop games that I think are criminally underrated. If you like anything I do, go check these guys out and check out their games. They're really awesome, and I can't praise them enough. Check out my showcases on these games if you want to see why I like them so much. But with all that taken care of, let's move on. Up to this point, we've put together what I consider a good starting point for a tabletop role-playing game. We have what I call my large landmass map and a little bit of lore to go with it. This gives us the ability to set the stage and have a place that can be filled with other like towns and things and curiosities and all the stuff that you want to find on a map. We have a zoomed in regional map, which in itself can contain enough to last for years of gaming. And this is actually the map I recommend the most. These regional maps really provide you with a lot of ability to create and to give plenty of places for players to go and explore without it being an entire continent. But that's just me. We also have a local area with a village and some lore around that to get all the adventuring starting. Not too bad. Now, if you haven't done it by now, take some time to upload your images and tokens and maps and such into the virtual tabletop of your choice. I'm not going to walk through any virtual tabletops or anything here. There's just a lot out there. I trust that you're choosing a virtual tabletop that you understand how to use and is easy for you. Check out session 0 in this series if you want some recommended virtual tabletops that I use. If you are able to be at a physical table, this is where you might want to print up, make, or even purchase the figures, tokens that will be the PCs or NPCs, and all the maps or terrain that you want. Now, honestly, depending on how much detail you want to go into, this is where a lot of time could be added to your prep. But if that's where your creative tendencies lie, and you have the time to do it, then go for it, and have fun. You may have noticed by now, but the underlying secret of my way of world building here that I'm describing is to build in layers based on the questions that you have about that area. I hope that this video series has showcased this at least a little bit. Essentially, the idea is that you start with some basic ideas and go back adding layers of detail by answering questions you need to answer for the situation and for things to make sense. You then allow those answers to guide your decisions as you move forward from there, adding another layer of questions and answers that will add another layer of detail to your world. This is an ongoing process and lasts as long as you want to play in that world. For me, this method helps create a world that feels alive and seems to make sense. It's common practice for the GM to use the time in between sessions to write in and or add detail to their worlds based on what's going on. Basically, your personal inspirations that you get and the decisions that you and the players make will give a rise to different questions and need for detail, and you do that as it comes. Between sessions, you'll always have something you can add in, whether the gameplay directs it or not, but gameplay will be the biggest factor in directing your decisions, I would argue, at least in the way that I'm doing this. But speaking of players and inspirations and world building, include players in your world building. And I would even say right from the start, and keep them included throughout the game. There are a ton of ways you can have players help in world building, but let me give you some examples. You can start by having them maybe create a unique creature for an area and some lore around it. It doesn't have to be super complex. It doesn't even have to be dangerous. Perhaps they can create the village, the small town, the spacecraft, or the neighborhood or small section of a larger place that their PC comes from, complete with some local places and NPCs. This not only helps you, the GM, out, but also gives the player a more intimate knowledge of that place, just like someone who actually has lived there. Likewise, the player gets more invested in the overall world. You might also ask them to create some just general local lore in the place that they're in. Really, how much you want to give the players is up to you, but I strongly recommend you ask the players to create something. even if it's just a signature dish or drink of a certain tavern or town. I mean, remember, tabletop RPGs are collaborative games after all, so let the world building be collaborative too. Okay guys, in the last video I promised some adventure ideas. Since this is a world building series, I'm not going to write full adventures here. What I will do is go back to the formula of asking questions to add some layers of detail. From these details I will extract some ideas for adventures, but I will go no farther than that, just the ideas. You can feel free to take the ideas and flesh them out a little bit more to tailor them to your world. I will take time to briefly show you what questions I asked and answered to get the detail I wanted and the ideas I generated from those details. We'll take a look at the Copper Swamp, the Smuggler's Island, the Forest Wraith, and I will add a bonus of using roll tables from Forge Fantasy to give some other ideas for future situations. Okay guys, we're going to start with the additions I made to the Copper Swamp, and this is the one I definitely spent the most time on and wrote the most about. Now, I'm going about this by answering questions and using a lot of things that just come to my own head. I'll try to show you the questions that I asked and answered to come up with more detail of an area and then give me some ideas for adventures for the future. With the Copper Swamp, I just wanted some basics to start off with from the last video we had. We know it's a once sacred place that was corrupted ages ago. We know that it's covered by copper-colored water and that it remains mostly avoided. And that's my starting point. So the first question I had was, what made the water copper-colored? Now this probably isn't fully geologically correct, but I do know that iron can change the color of water to a coppery color. In this case, I explained the copper-colored water as an iron vein under and around the swamp. This way, a lot of iron with a little bit of water on top could be colored copper and even stain the ground around it to a certain degree, since it's been doing that for a long time. And that explains why it's copper. Okay, since we have that explained, then what made this place so sacred? Now, after looking at the map and taking into account that there's this large iron ore here, I thought maybe it would make a lot of sense that a temple to a god of the forge used to reside here. It was a small temple, humble, but they were very, very pious. Because of that, it gained the favor of Ekemez, this god of the forge, god of blacksmiths. And he blessed the people of that temple with extra strength, with extra blacksmithing skills, and with longevity. Okay, that's what made it sacred once. Well, it's cursed right now, so what are the effects of the curse? And in this case, I mean, how does the curse affect the players, if it does affect them? Well, being on these cursed grounds will reduce a player's strength by 2. It also contains the ancient undead skeletons of those that caused the curse on the ground. It's like their punishment, maybe. But what did cause this curse? Well, the way I looked at it, there was a temple to the same god, but to the east of the Unresting Heights, to the east of that mountain range there. And they heard of this temple and became jealous when it was confirmed that they were favored by their god. Now this temple initiates a smear campaign against the small, humble temple, and then the leader of that larger temple is able to rally his followers to attack and take the small temple by force. In his twisted way, thinking he's going to gain the favor of that god, but actually in doing so, he cursed that land and temple while also cursing him and his followers with undeath and an unending restless existence. Now, I'll be honest, I just kind of worked this through my mind, and I'm sure there's some inspiration from stories I've read in the past weaving its way in there, but that's how I came up with that. I literally just thought through it. So from there, I'm asking the question, can the curse be broken? And if so, how? Yes. Now, the how question is kind of a trick question here, guys. I often recommend that you don't really come up with a solution, or if you do what I'm going to do right now, come up with one solution, but don't make that set in stone. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of players will often come up with really awesome and creative ideas to overcome a situation. And most of the time, that's what I go with when I'm looking for an answer to a problem. The players usually come up with a better answer than I do, and I usually run with that. So even though I have an idea here, it is not set in stone. It is just an idea I can go with, and they can figure out as they go if they do indeed try to figure it out. So the idea I had is that within the old foundation of this temple remains an old and weathered forge, and this forge can still be lit. Now, if this forge is lit and a piece of iron is put into the fire, it will call an avatar to this god of the blacksmiths. And they can speak with this avatar and find that the curse can fully be broken when the faithful return and the undead enemies are vanquished. They'd be able to find out of this ritual because it's inscribed on the forge in an ancient language that needs to be translated. Now, once more, that's not what has to happen, but that's the idea I have and one that they can figure out. And that's how I recommend you go about that most of the time. Make it something they can figure out by giving clues or just telling them how it's done in some way. Make it obvious with stuff that's around, or have somebody just straight up tell them. They find directions somewhere else. Maybe it's a book, maybe it's a person. At any event, give them a way to figure it out, but if they can't or they come up with a better idea, go with their ideas first. It always makes things a lot more fun, and it gives you, the GM, a bit of a challenge to think on your feet while things like that happen. And for me, that's fun. Hopefully it is for you too. All right, moving on here, I wanted to ask, what could this mean? What would it mean to the villagers if they went to this place or if they broke this curse? Well, it could be a new god for the villagers to ally with, maybe even to begin to worship and rebuild the temple back to its glory, regaining that god's favor. Or maybe it could just be a new resource that they can now use. Having this very large iron vein, they now have a lot of possibilities for blacksmithing, crafting, and for trade. It might also be a way that Deerhorn expands the land that it controls. And that's just a few. There's other ways that this can either benefit or be a detriment to Deerhorn, but that's just some ideas I had off the top of my head. These answers help direct our answers later on in this method of constantly questioning and adding layers of detail until you get to the point where you can add no more detail, basically. Now, on this one, I did add a bit of a twist. Considering the Order of the Abundant Moon, I thought maybe they wouldn't want this area mined. Did they just make up this cursed tale? Are they just using these stories as a kind of way to Scooby-Doo people and scare them off the land with ghost stories? A good twist to add in there in case that's the kind of game you want to run. Now, some adventure ideas generated off all this, I think, is a lot of the adventure ideas, I think, kind of generate themselves, and you'll see what I mean. Investigate the swamp, of course. Investigating the swamp can come in many ways. They can be sent there. They can accidentally come upon it. Somebody can call them there. There's lots of ways you can investigate it. Maybe they start by just investigating the outside and work their way in. Maybe there's something in the middle they need to get to right away. There's a lot of ways you can use investigate to create an adventure out of. But investigating the swamp would, of course, be the number one thing you think of. The second one is more a play off of that. If you think maybe there's some kind of artifact to be found in the swamp somewhere, but those darn meddling skeletons keep getting in the way. Maybe activity has been seen in the swamp, which is curious because it's always been so avoided. So another way you can investigate that swamp. Something else considers maybe those skeletons that live in that swamp have actually been leaving and getting closer to the village, causing panic and worry. These are just some adventure ideas you can generate just from the details of the land itself. There's lots of other ways to come up with adventures, but I'm using world building here and showing you how world building can generate adventure ideas. Nothing more than that. Let's move on and check out what I did with the Smuggler's Island. Now with this one, I ended up blending two competing ideas I had into one idea and creating a new faction in the process. And it all started with me debating on whether I wanted there to be a wizard or a group of smugglers in a dungeon underneath this island. As you could tell by the name, the smugglers kind of won that fight. In fact, in this case, kind of literally. So let's start off by asking, who's there? A group that calls themselves the Faceless are the residents of the island. Now, I got that name from Fantasy Generator, and I'm using that name to come up with some of the lore. In this case, the fact that they all wear masks that are enchanted and makes them appear like they have no face at all. Now, they're on this island because they took it from a wizard who hid here to practice his arcane arts by himself. So in this case, this faction of thieves and fences physically took out the wizard that did live here, and my competing idea itself became the physical altercation that gave the smugglers this island. So sometimes you come up with ideas in funny ways and introduce new factions the same way. Now, what do they use this island for? Well, it's an organized crew of smugglers, fences, and thieves. They utilize the dungeon underneath as a hideout where they can hide their gold and hide some of the more valuable goods, and as a base for people to stay there. Now, the surface of the island is where you can conduct typical business, let's say. In this case, there might be tents up there where fences stay to trade in stolen goods. Perhaps people come there to hire thieves or to hire people to smuggle stolen goods from one place to another. Now, quick note here, I did steal some pre-made NPCs that we downloaded in earlier videos and put them under this group just to give me a few people that could be contacts or leaders if the need arises. Now, the other question I wanted to ask is, what can the presence of this group mean for the village? Well, they could either be allies or enemies, and that in itself can bring a lot of different ideas and different gameplay around. And them just being there does introduce an element of danger to the area, both them themselves being a dangerous group and them attracting other dangerous groups to the area. So these are places we might be able to find conflict, and that's something that can generate more ideas later. Adventure ideas for the island, of course. Again, I'm going with a lot of ones that just kind of make themselves, and yes, some of them are generic, but the generic ideas are filled in with the details of your world that makes it more suitable for the game that you're playing. In this case, perhaps a party needs to spy on the island and learn the movements of the group that lives there. Or maybe there's some missing shipments of goods and merchants are losing some money and the occupants of those islands are suspected in the whole deal. Or maybe there's even some villagers that seem to be working for the Faceless, and this needs to be confirmed and handled in one way or another. Now again, just 3 ideas that seem to be pretty obvious right off the bat, but those ideas can be fleshed out to more intricate adventures and maybe even more than one or a mini campaign if you really wanted to. Third thing I did was add a little bit of detail to the Forest Wraith. In this case, the question I asked myself is, what could the party or village gain from this creature? Now for me, I always think it's really cool to give the players an ability that a creature has. In this case, this creature has 2 pretty cool abilities. The mist ability, so it phases into a mist and then back into a physical form, and the swarm control ability, which in itself is just fun, I think. So what I decided was that parts of this creature can give the players those powers when crafted properly. The first thing I thought is if you take that shell that gives it the mist power, then a piece of armor or a shield or something similar can be made if you find the right person that gives the player or the wielder that same ability for 1d4 rounds twice a day. The second thing I came up with was using the antenna, and those can be used to create a wand or a staff or some other magical item or focus that gives the wielder the ability to control a swarm of nearby insects 2 times a day for 1 hour at a time. These are slightly weakened versions of the creature's abilities, and I think that's what makes them so much fun. They give a player a very unique ability that nobody else can claim, and gives them that trophy of how they defeated that difficult creature and were able to get the reward from it, which is such a big part, especially the old school type of game that I'm trying to create here. Now, the second question I wanted to ask was, where did this creature come from? It might seem like a cop-out, but no one knows is what I wanted. I want this creature to be an absolute mystery, a complete anomaly. Nobody knows where it came from or why it's there. Leaving a little bit of mystery with questions unanswered sometimes is what really makes the game more engaging, because not knowing is what makes things a little bit more spooky or a little bit more interesting. So don't be afraid to leave some mystery here and there, but don't sprinkle it too liberally. Then you ruin the flavor. Hunt the creature in some way. Now, there could be a million reasons why to hunt the creature, including just wanting to hunt it. but hunt the creature for something. Hunt it for a trophy. Hunt it because it's attacking. Hunt it because it's damaging even though it doesn't know it is. Because you like how shiny it is. At the end, really, whatever you want to have as the reason, but hunting the creature is, of course, one of the first things you're going to do, because we create creatures in tabletop games so we can go and take them out. A second idea is that somebody else already knows about the items that can be made from its parts and wants to hire somebody to take that creature and harvest those parts for them. And of course, you can always have the creature in the good old-fashioned random encounter-based roll and see if anybody rolls it up when they're exploring the forest that it lives in. Generic as they may be, still they offer plenty of space to create a more uniquely tailored game to the world that you live in. Now, moving on to the fourth one, I promised you guys I was going to use the roll tables and give you some adventure ideas that way. And this is how I did it. I used the Forge adventure prompt roll tables that are provided in that book. And I came up with the words communicate and leadership after rolling on those tables. Might be basic, might be pretty much what you may have thought of as well. But again, this is basic ideas that you flesh out and add your detail to tailor to your world. So what I thought is maybe that the leaders of Deerhorn just kind of are taking on the if you can't beat them, join them way of thinking. And they want to try to contact and begin a dialogue with the Order of the Abundant Moon, or with the Faceless, or maybe with both. Maybe they think that by forming this alliance, it'll strengthen their chances to maintain their village, or maybe even grow it. Another way to look at it is maybe the leaders of Deerhorn want to establish communication with the leaders of a nearby tribe, village, town, group, city, whatever, that might help protect against those other factions, or at least offer a place to retreat or aid in the event that's necessary. The other idea is to flip it a different way. Maybe your PCs need to gain an audience with the leaders of Deerhorn to communicate with them so they can gain some kind of approval, some supplies, directions, or whatever else that they have that the party needs so they can move forward. Now, these are just 3 quick ideas I came up with based on those words. What other ideas can you generate just using those 2 words to create ideas for adventures? All right, everybody. I think those are some good adventure ideas, and adding some decent detail to the little places in the world that we found interesting a few videos ago. Now, in these examples, I use a combination of questions that I wanted to answer, my own ideas and inspirations guided by those details, and in the case of the last one, some roll tables to help create some adventure ideas. Now, you, of course, you're going to use your own questions and details to generate ideas that can be further fleshed out to create those adventure situations for yourself. Keep in mind that there are plenty of other ways to set up adventures. Here, I'm using world building to generate ideas for conflicts and situations, because this series is more about world building, and I'm showing you how that world building can affect your adventure ideas. But allow me to take a moment here to give you a couple more drops of GM advice from my experience with your world building. First, be sure that the world reacts to what happens during play when appropriate. If an event of some kind is large enough, what's the impact of that event on the environment, on the infrastructure of the area, or the local leadership, or on the locals themselves, be them people or animals? Do any complications arise, or does anything get better? Ask yourself some questions to see if what the players or NPCs have chosen to do creates issues, obstacles, or makes things better, or creates things to grow. Second, and likewise to that, be sure that the NPCs of the world help show that the world is living by having them also react to the world and to the players, physically and emotionally. A catastrophic event should have local people and leaders reacting. Destruction should leave its mark on the people as much as the land when it's large enough. A living world has living people or creatures in it, so try to keep that in mind as the players make decisions during gameplay, or the NPC groups that are either for or against them. Take a few notes and use them when adding your layers of detail for seeing where conflicts may exist. There it is, my people, the last video in this series. I think I set out to do what I tasked myself with, and I hope that the journey has given you some tips on getting ready for your first game, or your second or third, or whichever one. Feel free to steal this little world that we've created here and use it for the game of your choice if you so choose. Now, if you're new to being a GM, I welcome you and look forward to hearing some tales of your GMing. I hope that I helped you get started and gave you a little boost of confidence. Not that you ever really needed it. Before I close this one out, I want to let you guys know that there are some really big changes happening in my personal life, and they're happening relatively quickly. These are good things, but time-consuming things. That last fact may make recording and editing videos challenging, but I am committed to trying to keep some kind of presence here, mostly because I have a lot of video ideas remaining that I still want to do. So stay tuned. The frequency and format may change a little bit, but I should still be doing my thing. I might as well take this time now to thank you subscribers. I've cleared 700 subscribers as of this recording in October of 2025, and I can't be thankful enough. This is just a hobby for me, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. It just blows my mind that I'm getting subscribers like that, and I really appreciate every single one of you. I hope that you'll still find something in my videos that you can use or at least entertains you a little bit. Another huge shout out to friends of the channel, Ian Tassin and Jeremy Pete, for what those guys do, but also to all the other independent tabletop RPG writers and third-party writers and all the artists out there that are contributing to our hobby. You guys are giving us the inspiration and fuel for our games, and I love everything you guys are doing out there. Please keep up the awesome work. Now to you, the new GM, you are the creator and arbitrator of worlds. And your players, they'll probably try to destroy that at every chance they get somehow. But go forth in confidence, my friends, because the somewhat ironic thing about all of this is that the interaction of these seemingly opposing forces is one of the best ways for you and your players to play for fun first. Thanks for watching, everybody.